There is a room in Jerusalem, lit by a single lamp, and a fisherman named Peter is sitting in it on the worst night of his life. Hours ago, he swore he would die with the man he loves. And the man he loves just told him that, before the rooster crows, Peter will swear 3 times that he never knew him at all. Judas has already walked out into the darkness to betray him. The food from the Last Supper is still on the table. And in this room, on this night, with Peter and the others, afraid and grieving, Jesus says something that people are still arguing about 2,000 years later. The Father is greater than I. Those words, from John chapter 14, verse 28. If you have ever heard this verse used to say that Jesus is not God, you are not imagining it. It has been used that way for almost 2,000 years. And if you have ever read it and felt your confidence wobble, even a little, you are in good company. Peter was confused that very night. The church argued about it for centuries. And most people who quote it today have never looked at where it sits. Because here is something most people never realize. This verse is not standing alone. It is not a footnote. It is not a footnote. It is not a theology exam that Jesus suddenly dropped on his friends. It is the final verse of a speech that opens with 4 words, "Don't let your heart be troubled." Let me set the scene because the room matters. This is the night before the cross. Peter left his boat, his nets, everything he knew, to follow Jesus for 3 years. He watched Jesus heal the blind and raise the dead. And now Jesus has said the thing Peter never wanted to hear. He is going away. And Peter, the same Peter who promised to die with him, has just been told he will deny him instead. The lamp is low, and these men are afraid. Now watch what Jesus does with that fear. He does not hand them a doctrine. He does not pull out a whiteboard. He answers fear with the words of John chapter 14, verse 1. Don't let your heart be troubled. And then, in the same breath, on the same night, in the same conversation, he says both of these things. He who has seen me has seen the Father, and the Father is greater than I. Both sentences. Same room. Same hour. If you open your Bible to John chapter 14, verse 28, and you read it the way most people read it, one verse, pulled out, standing on its own, it sounds like Jesus is telling you, plainly, that he is less than the Father, that there is a ladder and he is on a lower rung. And if that is what the verse means, then the whole story falls apart. Because the same book that records this verse also records something else. Something that should stop you cold. John chapter 1, verse 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. John chapter 8, verse 58. Jesus says, "Most certainly I tell you, before Abraham came into existence, I am, not I was, I am." The name God gave Moses at the burning bush. John chapter 10, verse 30. I and the Father are one. John chapter 20, verse 28. A man named Thomas falls at Jesus' feet and says, "My Lord and my God." And Jesus does not correct him. Same book, same author, and the same night, the same conversation, in which Jesus says the Father is greater than I. He also says, in John chapter 14, verse 9, "He who has seen me has seen the Father." So now you have a real problem. Either the Gospel of John is contradicting itself, or the Father is greater than I means something different from what it looks like on the surface. And this is not a small problem. This one sentence, spoken by a man whose friends were crying, has been used to argue that Jesus is a creature, something less, standing below the Father. And here's the thing about that argument. It does not come from nowhere. There is a reason it keeps showing up. Because on the surface, the verse really does read that way. If you do not look at the room, if you do not look at the night, if you do not read the sentence the way it was actually built, it looks like Jesus is confessing inferiority. So here's what we are going to do. We are going to sit in that room with Peter and the others. We are going to read this verse the way they would have heard it, clause by clause. Then we are going to trace it through the rest of the same book, and through the longest argument the church has ever had about it. And by the end, I think you will see something you may have never seen before. That this verse, the one that gets used to knock Jesus down, is actually one of the most comforting things Jesus ever said. And the proof is sitting in the same room, on the same night, right next to it. It is Thursday night, The Passover meal is finished. Jesus has said that one of them will betray him. He has dipped the bread and handed it to Judas. And John writes the same gospel, John chapter 13, verse 30. Therefore, having received that morsel, he went out immediately. It was night. That is how the Gospel of John describes the moment Judas leaves. It was night, not just dark outside. Night. The Gospel wants you to feel what is happening in that room. Then Jesus turns to the men who are left, and he begins to speak. The first words out of his mouth are not about theology. They are about fear. John chapter 14, verse 1. Don't let your heart be troubled. You believe in God. Believe also in me. Now here is the detail that changes everything. The whole chapter, all of chapter 14, is a comfort speech, a place prepared, a promise to come back, the way, the truth, and the life, and the helper, the comforter, who will be with them forever. And then, at the end of this speech, he says, the verse that everybody quotes at each other in debates. The Father is greater than I. Think about what that means. These are not the words of a man giving a lecture on the nature of God. These are the words of a man standing in a room with grieving friends, trying to explain why his leaving is not a tragedy. He is not grading papers. He is holding his loved ones together. And that changes where you put the weight of the sentence. Because if you read the verse the way it is actually constructed, the way the words actually land, the point of the sentence is not, the Father is greater. The point of the sentence is, you should rejoice. Let me show you what I mean. Here is the verse, John chapter 14, verse 28. As Jesus actually spoke it, you heard how I told you, I am going away, and I will come back to you. If you love me, you would have rejoiced because I said, I am going to my Father. For the Father is greater than I. Now watch the structure. There is an if, and there is a because. If you loved me, you would have rejoiced. That is the main clause. That is the heart of the sentence. Because I said, I am going to my Father. That is the reason. For the Father is greater than I. That is the explanation of the reason. So the verse is not primarily making a claim about the Father's superiority. The verse is making a claim about Peter's love. Jesus is saying, if you really understood what is happening, you would not be weeping, you would be rejoicing. Because I am going to my Father, and the Father is greater than I. And the Father is greater than I. Now here is what that tells us. Whatever the Father is greater than I means it has to be something that turns grief into joy. It has to be good news. It cannot be a demotion, because Jesus is not saying, cheer up, I am less than I thought I was. He is saying, the reason this is good news is that I am going to the Father. And notice what comes right after, in the very next verse. John chapter 14, verse 29. Now I have told you before it happens, so that, when it happens, you may believe. The verse is not a riddle for scholars. It is a signpost. Jesus tells them in advance, so that, when the dust settles and the stone rolls away, they will look back and believe. So already, the surface reading is wobbling. Because if this verse was Jesus admitting he is not God, it would be the worst-timed admission in history. Why would you comfort terrified people by telling them the person they trust is actually less than they thought? It makes no sense. But if the verse means something that makes his going to the Father a reason to rejoice, then it is doing exactly what it was supposed to do in that room. But here is the honest thing. There is still the word greater. Jesus still said it. And if we are going to take this verse seriously, we cannot just wave at the word and move on. We have to find out what kind of greater this is. And the answer to that question is sitting in the same gospel, on the same night, in the very same prayer. Back up a few verses. The night has not even reached the comfort speech yet. John chapter 13, verse 3. And here's what it says about Jesus. The same night, the same room, right before he takes off his outer garment, wraps a towel around his waist, and washes his friend's feet. Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he came from God and was going to God. Did you catch that? The gospel tells us what Jesus knew. He knew where he came from. He knew the Father had given all things into his hands, and he knew where he was going. He was going to God. This is not a man who is confused about his origins. This is a man who knows he came from the Father, and knows he is going back. So when, A little later in the same night, he says, "I am going to my Father." He is not talking about a journey into the unknown. He is talking about a homecoming. He is the Son, returning to the one who sent him. He came from the Father. He is going to the Father. And in between, he does the Father's. And in between, he does the Father's work. Now here is the pattern that runs through the whole Gospel of John like a current under the water. The Father sends. The Son comes. The Son does not speak on his own authority. The Son returns to the one who sent him. Over and over. John chapter 5, verse 19. The Son can do nothing of himself. John chapter 5, verse 30. I can of myself do nothing. John chapter 16, verse 28. I came from the Father, and have come into the world. Again, I leave the world, and go to the Father. And now, this is where it gets personal. Think about what it means to be sent by someone you love. You do not go because you are small. You go because you are trusted. The one who sends you is counting on you. And the whole time you are on the road, you speak as the sent one. You do not speak as though you were back home. You speak from the place of the one who carries the message. That is what Jesus is doing all night long. He is not shrinking. He is on a mission. And a mission has a sender and a sent one. But what was waiting for him when he got back? What was he going home to? The answer is, in the prayer he prays, the same night, in John chapter 17. John chapter 17 is the longest recorded prayer of Jesus in the entire Bible. He prays it the same night, in the same upper room, after the same speech. And in that prayer, Jesus says something that should stop you cold. John chapter 17, verse 5. Now, Father, glorify me with your own self, with the glory which I had with you before the world existed. Read that again. The glory which I had with you before the world existed, before there were galaxies, before there was a planet, before there was a garden or a serpent or a single human being drawing breath. Jesus says he had glory with the Father. He is not asking for glory he hopes to earn. He is asking to be restored to glory he already had, before the world existed. So now the picture is coming into focus. The same night, the same room. The same man who says, "The Father is greater than I," also says, "Glorify me with the glory I had with you before the world existed." Those two statements are sitting in the same conversation, and they both have to be true, which means greater cannot mean what it looks like it means on the surface. Because you do not ask to be restored to glory you had before the world existed if you are a lesser being who only appeared in time. But let me take you somewhere else before we solve it. Let me take you to the rest of the Gospel of John, because this book refuses to let you read one verse in a corner. John chapter 1, verse 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. John chapter 5, verse 18. The Jewish leaders wanted to kill Jesus because he called God his own Father, making himself equal with God. John chapter 8, verse 58. Before Abraham came into existence, I am. John chapter 10, verse 30. I and the Father are one. John chapter 20, verse 28. Thomas falls at his feet and calls him my Lord and my God, and Jesus receives the worship. And here is the detail people miss. This is not a different Jesus. This is not a different book. This is the same gospel, written by the same man, with a stated purpose. John chapter 20, verse 31. But these are written, that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that believing you may have life in his name. The whole book exists, so people will believe Jesus is the Son of God. You cannot read one verse as proof that Jesus is not God without tearing the book out of its own hands. So now the contradiction is fully on the table. Same book, same night, same man. He who has seen me has seen the Father, and the Father is greater than I. If both are true, then greater has to mean something very specific. Let me show you what the same conversation says about that. Let us go back to the same night, the same speech, and listen to what Jesus actually says about his relationship with the Father, because it is all there. John chapter 14, verse 9. Philip has just asked Jesus to show them the Father, and Jesus answers him, Have I been with you such a long time, and do you not know me, Philip? He who has seen me has seen the Father. How do you say, show us the Father? He who has seen me has seen the Father. You cannot look at a created being and walk away having seen God. You cannot look at someone who is less than God and say, "There, now you have seen the Father." That sentence only works if Jesus is the visible face of the invisible God. And then, verse 10, "Don't you believe that I am in the Father, and the Father in me? The words that I tell you, I speak not from myself, but the Father who lives in me does his works. I am in the Father, and the Father in me. Not the Father is above me, and I am below him. In Bay, a mutual indwelling. In prove this." The same intimacy Jesus describes in John chapter 10, verse 30, "I and the Father are one." Now hold on to that, because we have arrived at the real puzzle. In the same breath, Jesus says, "I and the Father are one, and the Father is greater than I." How can both be true? How can you be one with someone and still say they are greater than you? The answer is hiding in plain sight, in the way Jesus keeps talking about himself all night long. And the way he talks is this. He keeps calling himself the one who was sent. "The Father sent me. I came from the Father. I do not speak on my own." Over and over, through the whole Gospel of John, Jesus describes himself as the sent one, and that is the key, because here is what a mission does. A mission creates a difference in role, not a difference in worth. The one who sends and the one who is sent can be equal in every way, equal in being, equal in nature, and still, in the sending, there is a relationship of authority. The Son goes, the Son obeys, the Son does the Father's will, and he does it not because he is less, but because he loves. That is not a ladder, that is a family. And on this night, the night before the cross, the Son is speaking from the road, from the mission, from the place of the sent one. He is not speaking from the throne. And that is the whole point. Now we come to the deepest part. And this is the part that, if you have never seen it, will change how you read this verse forever. Why does the Son of God, the one who is equal with the Father, the one who is equal with the Father, are one, why does he speak this way? Why does the one who said before Abraham came into existence, "I am" sound, in this room, like someone on a lower rung? The answer is not a demotion. The answer is a choice. And the Apostle Paul explains it in a letter he wrote to a church in Philippi. Philippians chapter 2, verses 6 and 7. Listen to these words. "Who, existing in the form of God, didn't consider equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself, taking the form of a servant, being made in the likeness of men," existing in the form of God. That is the starting point. The Son was already in the form of God. He already had equality with God. And he did not consider that equality a thing to be grasped, something to cling to, something to hoard. Instead, he emptied himself. He took the form of a servant. He was made in the likeness of men. He was made in the likeness of men. He was made in the likeness of men. That is the hinge of the whole thing. The Son of God did not stop being God when he became flesh. John chapter 1, verse 14. "The Word became flesh and lived among us. We saw his glory, such glory as of the only born Son of the Father, full of grace and truth." The Word became flesh. The Word did not stop being the Word. The glory was still there. Peter saw it. Peter saw it. But he added something. He added humanity. He added the servant's form. He added weakness, hunger, thirst, exhaustion, and the full weight of a human life. He who existed in the form of God emptied himself. He did not empty himself of deity. You cannot empty a thing of what it is. He emptied himself of the outward display, the privilege, the graspable glory. The graspable glory. He traded the throne for the robe for the towel. And here is the moment. It all comes together. When Jesus says in that room, "The Father is greater than I," he is not speaking from the throne he left. He is speaking from the road he chose. He is the Son, equal with the Father in being, now living in the humble state of the sent one, the servant, the man who will wash feet and die a criminal's death. From that state, the Father is greater in role, greater in mission, the sender over the sent, the one who waits at home over the one who travels, but not greater in being, because the same night, the same man says, "He who has seen me has seen the Father, and I and the Father are one," equal in being, greater in role. That is how both sentences hold. That is how the whole book holds. That is how the church has held it for 2,000 years. The Father is not more God than the Son. The Father and the Son are the same God, but the Father sent and the Son went. And the Son went willingly, because he loves the Father, and because he loves us. Now, why did he do it? Why leave the glory? Why take the road? The answer is sitting in the same speech, and it is the most practical thing in this whole study. Here is what most people miss about this verse, and about the whole night. The disciples were treating Jesus' departure as a tragedy. Peter was grieving like a man who had been abandoned, and Jesus, in the middle of this same speech, says something that should have flipped their world upside down. John chapter 16, verse 7. Nevertheless, I tell you the truth. It is to your advantage that I go away. For if I don't go away, the counselor won't come to you. But if I go, I will send him to you. Read that again. It is to your advantage. Not just, it will be okay. Not just, I will come back. It is to your advantage that I go away. Jesus is telling them, the thing you are treating as a loss is actually a gain. If I stay, the Helper cannot come. If I go, I will send him. And what did he promise them about this Helper? John chapter 14, verses 16 and 17. I will pray to the Father, and he will give you another counselor, that he may be with you forever. The Spirit of truth. Another counselor. The Greek word is parakletos, one called alongside, the one who stands beside you. And Jesus says, this helper will be with them forever. Not for 3 years. Forever. John chapter 14, verse 26. But the counselor, the Holy Spirit, whom the Father will send in my name, he will teach you all things, and will remind you of all that I said to you. Now put the whole night together. Jesus is going to the Father. And because he goes, the Spirit comes. The Son returns to glory, and the Spirit is poured out. Peter is not being abandoned. He is being given something he could not have received if Jesus had stayed in the room with him. The departure is the doorway. The going makes way for the coming. Picture it. There is an empty chair across the table from you. The person who used to sit there is gone, and Jesus is saying, I am leaving that chair empty so that something else can come, someone who will not leave it empty again. The grief of that night was real. You do not get to skip the grief, but it was not the end of the story. It was the hinge, and the hinge is where everything turns. Now, this verse started a debate that shaped the church for centuries. And if you want to understand how serious that debate was, look at what it produced. Here is something that might surprise you. The Father is greater than I was not first used as a weapon in the modern era. It is as old as the church itself. And in the early 4th century, it ignited the most important debate Christianity has ever had. There was a teacher named Arius, a priest in Alexandria, and Arius built an entire teaching on verses like this one. He took the Father is greater than I and said, there it is, plain as day. The Son is not God by nature. The Son is the first and the greatest of all creatures. A wonderful being, the one through whom God made everything, but still a creature. Made. There was a time when the Son did not exist. That is what Arius taught. And he did not teach it quietly. He wrote it into popular songs, and the church in his day was singing them. Now here is the thing about Arius. He was not stupid. He was not a fool. He could quote the Bible. He could quote this verse. And his argument sounded faithful, because it used scripture. Which is exactly why the church had to answer him with more than a shrug. In the year 325, the Emperor Constantine called a council in a city called Nicaea. Hundreds of bishops gathered, and at the center of their argument was the same problem we have been holding all night. On the table in front of them were both sentences. I and the Father are one, and the Father is greater than I, and the bishops refused to drop either one. They knew that if you let one sentence crush the other, you lose the gospel, so they produced a confession, the Nicene Creed, that you can still hear in churches around the world today. And at the center of that creed is one line about the Son. He is begotten, not made. Of one substance with the Father, God of God, light of light, very God of very God. Think about what they were doing. They were not ignoring John chapter 14, verse 28. They had read it. They knew it was in the Bible. They quoted it in the debate, but they refused to let one verse crush the witness of the whole. They held the whole Bible together and said, both are true, equal in being. The Father the source, the Son, begotten of the Father. And in the sending, in the mission, in the incarnate life, the Father is greater. And here is the honest part I need to tell you. Faithful Christians have explained exactly how that greater works in slightly different ways. Some put the weight on the incarnation. The Son speaks from his humble state as the sent one. Some put the weight on the Father as the eternal source, the one from whom the Son is eternally begotten. Both are faithful. Both hold the same confession. The Church has never been able to fully map the inner life of God, and it would be dishonest to pretend we could. But what the Church has always refused to do, from Messiah to today, is let this verse make Jesus a creature. One verse. One sentence, spoken in a room full of grief, and it changed the Church forever. Now, let me tell you what it means for you. Let us come back to the room. Because we have done a lot of theology, and the whole time there has been a fisherman sitting in lamplight, afraid. Think about what Jesus was actually doing when he said these words. He was not defending a doctrine. He was not grading a paper. He was trying to give his friends a way to survive the worst night of their lives. He knew what was coming. He knew the arrest. He knew the arrest. He knew the tomb. And he knew Peter would be out in the courtyard, 3 times denying that he ever knew him. So he said the most comforting thing he could possibly say. If you loved me, you would have rejoiced because I said, I am going to my Father. And here's what stays with me most about this verse. When Jesus says the Father is greater than I, he is not shrinking. He is giving them a reason to hope. He is saying, my going is not a defeat, it is a return. I am going to the one who sent me. I am going back to the glory I had before the world existed. And from there, I will send the Helper, and you will never be alone again. Now, let me be honest about how this lands in real life, because there are seasons where it does not feel like rejoicing. There are seasons where it feels like Jesus has gone away and left you in the room alone. A door closes. A prayer seems to go unanswered. The silence stretches, and you find yourself wondering if God is really for you, really near you, really still with you. And this is the verse that speaks into that exact feeling. Because Jesus did not leave his friends to grieve without help. He left them, and us, the Helper. The one who is with us forever. The one who is with us forever. When Jesus says the Father is greater than I, he is not telling you that God is far above you and out of reach. He is telling you that his going made a way for the Spirit to come, the Spirit who stands beside you, who teaches you, who reminds you of Jesus, who is with you forever. Think about Peter for a moment, the man who denied the Lord 3 times before the rooster crowed, the man who wept in the dark. That same Peter stood up in Jerusalem weeks later and preached, filled with the Spirit Jesus promised that night. The Helper came. The man who was afraid in the lamplight became the man who would not be silent. You have not been abandoned. You have been given the Helper. That is what this verse is really saying. That is why it is good news. And notice how Jesus ends this whole conversation. John chapter 14, verse 27. Peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. Not as the world gives, do I give to you. Don't let your heart be troubled, neither let it be fearful. He started the speech with, don't let your heart be troubled. He ends it with the same words. The whole chapter is a circle of peace. And the verse that people use to knock Jesus down is sitting in the middle of that circle. It is not a threat. It is comfort. It is a homecoming. Let me take you back to the room, one last time. The lamp is still burning. The food is still on the table. And a fisherman named Peter is sitting in the dark, not knowing that before this night is over, the world he knew will come apart, and that he will be the one who breaks first. And this is what Jesus told him. The last thing, the thing that holds the whole night together. He who has seen me has seen the Father. I and the Father are one. I am going to my Father, and the Father is greater than I. The glory I had with you, before the world existed, the Helper is coming. Peace I leave with you. Every sentence is true, and together they are not a riddle. They are a portrait. The Son who was equal with the Father chose the road. He emptied himself. He took the form of a servant. He went all the way down to a basin, to a cross, to a tomb. And then the Father raised him up, gave him the name above every name, and sent the Helper, so that no one who loves him would ever have to walk alone. That is what the Father is greater than I really means. Not that Jesus is less than God, but that the Son, in the depth of his love, took the place of the sent one, so that we could be brought home to the Father too. So the next time you hear that verse quoted against Jesus, you will know what to do. Do not pull it out of the room. Put it back in the room. Put it back on the table. Put it back on the lamplight. Put it back in the lamplight, with the fisherman who denied him, and the teacher who was steady, and the love that would not let him go. Because when you read it there, where it was always meant to be read, it is not a weapon at all. It is the most comforting sentence in the darkest room. The Father is greater than I. He said it so they would rejoice. He said it so the Helper could come. He said it so that, 2,000 years later, you would know this one thing. You are not alone. The road is not the end. And the one who went to the Father, the one who went all the way down, so that Peter could be raised up, is coming back for you.